The Mongol Empire killed 40 million people in less than a century. But dying was the easy part. The women who survived the massacres were fed into a system so brutal that medieval historians could barely bring themselves to describe it. Sorted like livestock, stripped of their names, and passed between soldiers like war trophies. And the worst part? It worked. Let's start with number 10, the sorting grounds. When a city fell to the Mongols, the screaming stopped, only when the generals said so. And then came something almost worse than the killing. Silence. Thousands of survivors dragged outside the city walls, forced to stand in the open. Families ripped apart right in front of each other. Men on one side, women on the other. Children pulled from their mothers' arms. The Persian historian Juvaini traveled with the Mongol army and saw this with his own eyes. After Bukhara fell in February 1220, he wrote about wives being torn from husbands, sisters separated from brothers, mothers screaming as their children were taken away. And Bukhara was a city of 300,000 people, one of the greatest centers of learning in the entire Islamic world, a place with a library holding 45,000 books. None of that mattered. When the Mongols were done, the whole city was on fire. But the separation was not chaos. It was a system. Mongol officers moved through the crowds with translators. They asked questions, inspected hands for calluses, looked at faces, checked teeth. They were sorting people by value, the same way a merchant would sort grain. Beautiful women and those of noble blood went to the top of the pile. Skilled workers like blacksmiths and weavers were tagged for transport to Mongolia. Young men got drafted into the Mongol army, whether they wanted to fight or not. And the women with no special beauty, no noble name, and no useful skills? They were worth the least. And the system treated them that way. But sorting was just the first step. What came next was where things got truly ugly. Next one is number 9. Gifts for the generals. In the Mongol world, captured women were not treated as people. They were treated as prizes. After every single conquest, the Khan personally oversaw the handing out of war trophies: gold, silk, horses, weapons, and women, all divided up by rank. Genghis Khan always got the first pick, then his sons, then his top generals, then their officers, then ordinary soldiers. Everybody got a share. And this was not some informal thing that just happened after a battle. It was the law, written directly into the Yasa, the legal code that Genghis Khan created to govern his empire. The Yasa said that war prizes, including human prisoners, had to be shared among empresses, princesses, military officers, and even children of concubines. Everyone received a cut. The capture and distribution of human beings was baked right into the legal system. When the Mongols destroyed the Khwarezmian Empire in 1220, the full horror of this system became clear. The capital city fell within months. Over 1 million residents were reportedly killed. And the women who survived? Distributed across the entire Mongol military like rations. Noble women went straight to Mongol royalty. The Shah's own mother, who had ruled the city of Urgench, was captured and shipped all the way back to Mongolia. She spent the rest of her life as a prisoner in a land she had never seen before. That, the message. Your queen is ours now. Your kingdom is finished. And the women in your family belong to whoever we decide to give them to. But forced distribution was only the beginning. The next method went even deeper. Let's move to number 8. Forced marriage as a weapon. The Mongols did not just take women as slaves, they married them. And that was the whole point. When a Mongol commander married a captured princess or queen, it was a message to every surviving member of that conquered nation. Your bloodline belongs to us now. Your future children will be Mongol. Everything your ancestors built, we just absorbed it into our empire. One of the wildest examples is a woman named Toragine. She was a Merkid princess. The Mongols crushed her people, killed her husband, and gave her to Genghis Khan's son Ogadai as a wife. A war trophy, basically. But Toragine did not just sit quietly in a tent. She outmaneuvered Ogadai's other wives. She gained his trust. And when Ogadai drank himself to death in 1241, Toragine took over. She ruled the entire Mongol Empire as regent for 5 years. She fired her dead husband's ministers, replaced them with her own people, and installed a Persian woman named Fatima, another former war captive, as her right hand. A captured woman running the largest empire on earth, with another captured woman as her chief advisor. That actually happened. But Toragine was the extreme exception. For every woman who clawed her way to power, thousands vanished without a trace. The Siberian queen Botohui Tarhun, whose name meant big and fierce, once defeated an entire Mongol army by luring a general into an ambush. They sent a bigger army the second time, captured her, married her off to a random Mongol soldier, and then she disappeared from history forever. That was the system. Fight back, and they will break you. Surrender, and they will erase you. And it got worse, because if your husband died, you did not go free. Under Mongol custom, a widow was expected to marry one of her dead husband's male relatives, a brother, a nephew, even a stepson. You stayed in the family like property being passed down. In Korea, a king was actually thrown off his throne for refusing to have children with his Mongol wife. That is how seriously the empire took these marriages. They had nothing to do with love, everything to do with control. But what about the women who were not married? Their fate was different, and in many ways even harder to escape. Here comes number 7, the concubine machine. Not every captured woman became a wife. Many became concubines, and in the Mongol world, a concubine was something between a servant and a spouse. Under the Yasa, children born to concubines were considered legitimate. That meant your children had legal standing in Mongol society, even if you were a foreign prisoner who had been dragged from your home in chains. The system was designed to produce heirs, and it produced them at scale. Genghis Khan's eldest son Tushi reportedly fathered 40 sons. Not 40 children, 40 sons. His brothers had similar numbers, and their sons kept the machine running. A 2003 genetic study published in the American Journal of Human Genetics dropped a bombshell. Researchers analyzed Y chromosomes from 16 populations across Asia and found that roughly 8% of men in the former Mongol Empire shared a nearly identical genetic marker. That added up to about 16 million men alive at the time. 1 in every 200 males on the planet, all tracing back to one family line roughly 1,000 years old. Now, a 2026 study from Kazakhstan actually challenged that specific number. Researchers tested DNA from medieval tombs believed to hold descendants of Jochi, and found that the most common version of this Y chromosome probably came from a different man who lived centuries before Genghis. But even with that correction, the scale of the genetic footprint is staggering. Generations of Mongol rulers taking dozens of wives and concubines from conquered populations created a biological ripple that is still detectable 800 years later. Most concubines lived in tightly controlled environments. Every step was watched. Every move is monitored. Marco Polo, who visited the court of Kublai Khan, noted that concubines did not just share the Khan's bed. They cooked his food, served his meals, sewed his clothing, and performed whatever task he demanded. They were a workforce and a breeding program wrapped into one. And there was no escape, no way out. No one is coming to save you. Which brings us to something even darker. Next one is number 6, erasing who you were. The Mongols understood something that other conquerors kept missing. If you want to truly break a conquered people, you do not just take their land, you take their identity. Captured women were cut off from everything they knew, their families gone, their language forbidden, their clothing replaced, their religion ignored or twisted. They were placed inside Mongol households, dressed in Mongol clothing, and expected to live by Mongol customs. Over time, many of these women assimilated completely. Their children grew up speaking Mongol. Their grandchildren did not know a single word of their grandmother's language. Imagine being a Persian noblewoman who once wore silk in a marble courtyard. Now you live in a felt tent on the open steppe. You ride horses in the freezing wind. You cook mutton over dried animal dung. You raise children who speak a language you barely understand. Everything you were is dead. The Hazara people of Afghanistan are a living example of this process. They carry mixed Persian, Mongolian, and Turkic ancestry. Oral traditions link them directly to Genghis Khan's army, and genetic studies have confirmed strong Mongol heritage dating back to the 1220 campaigns. The women who were absorbed into that army's households became the biological ancestors of an entire ethnic group. And most of their names? Lost forever, erased from the historical record as completely as if they had never existed. Only their blood survived, flowing quietly through generations that would never know where it came from. But the Mongols did not just erase identity behind the battle lines. They weaponized captured people on the battlefield itself. Here comes number 5, human shields. This is where the cruelty of the Mongol system hits a completely different level. During the siege of Samarkand in 1220, the Mongols took prisoners from Bukhara, the city they had just destroyed, and forced them to march at the front of the advancing army. The defenders of Samarkand stood on the walls and watched their own countrymen walking toward them with Mongol cavalry right behind. They had to choose. Shoot their own people or let the Mongols approach unopposed. It was designed to destroy your will before the fighting even started. And it worked. Samarkand fell in 5 days. Young men captured in one city were drafted and thrown at the walls of the next city as shock troops. They absorbed the first wave of arrows and boiling oil so the real Mongol soldiers could ride in behind them, fresh and ready to fight. Women and children were part of this system too. They marched with the baggage trains, performed labor during sieges, and were forced to help dispose of dead bodies after battles. At the siege of Urgench in 1221, after the city finally fell, artisans were packed off to Mongolia. Young women and children were handed out as slaves. And Genghis reportedly ordered each of his 50,000 soldiers to execute 24 civilians from the city. Even if that number was exaggerated by the chroniclers, the pattern was real. The entire Khwarezmian Empire, which had once held around 2 million people, was reduced to roughly 200,000 survivors in just 2 years. Cities that had stood for 500 years were wiped off the map, and in every one of those cities, the same machine ran. Men killed or drafted, women sorted and distributed, children raised as Mongols. Repeat. The captured women who survived all of this then entered the next phase of control. And this one was harder to see because it did not use chains. Let's move to number 4, the slave markets. As the empire expanded, the trade in captured women became a full-blown industry. Women taken during campaigns were not just absorbed into households. Many ended up in slave markets that stretched from China to Persia to Eastern Europe. These markets connected buyers and sellers across the entire continent. Skilled women who could weave, sew, practice medicine, or manage a household were worth the most. They got sent to workshops and production centers where they spent the rest of their lives making goods for Mongol elites. Women without special skills hit the open market. They could be bought, sold, traded, or given away, depending on whatever their owner decided that day. Their price depended on age, appearance, and physical condition. Persian women were especially prized. Mongol soldiers considered them among the most beautiful women in the medieval world, and they were traded heavily throughout the Western campaigns. A single Mongol tent might hold women from Persia, China, Russia, and Central Asia, all living under the authority of one Mongol wife who ran the household. The slave trade grew so large that it became one of the biggest economic engines in the entire empire. Whole supply chains developed around capturing, transporting, and selling human beings. Middlemen emerged, specialists who knew which markets paid the highest prices for which types of women. Traders who could move groups of captives across thousands of miles of steppe and desert to reach the buyers willing to pay the most. For the women stuck in this machine, there was no appeal, no rights, and no rescue. They were property, and the Mongol legal code treated them that way. But physical control was only one layer. The Mongols had another tool, and this one targeted the mind. Here comes number 3. Chains you cannot see. Physical captivity was bad enough, but the Mongols also used something much harder to resist. They gave captured women a spiritual purpose. Women in the Khan's household were expected